And at the end of the day, these NFTs, what they do is they're the best tool, in my opinion, because of the ability to visualize data and information with these things. They're the best tool to build digital communities, right? And online presence and an engaged fan club, essentially.
Hey everybody, Tanner here with WAGMI Ventures. On today's episode, we have Harrison Wang, co-founder and CEO at Unblocked. For anyone who's new, this is the WAGMI Ventures podcast, where we do snapshots with interesting founders from across Web3. Check out wagmiventures.io to learn more about the syndicate behind the podcast. But for now, let's get into it with Harrison from Unblocked. All right. Hey, everybody. I'm here today with Harrison Wang, co-founder and CEO of Unblocked. Harrison, how's it going today?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. I'm pumped to chat here. So I think one place to start might be, it'd be great to learn a little bit more about your story and what's brought you to building what you're building at Unblocked.
Yeah. So I've been in kind of the Web3 blockchain space for a while. Me, my two co-founders, and actually like 50-60% of our team, we've just been in kind of consumer tech for a long time. The two founders were from a company called Flipagram, which sold to ByteDance, and then under ByteDance, we helped start the first version of TikTok. In the U.S. This was when ByteDance just had their app called Douyin in China. Stayed a couple years, and then a group of us went to a company called Blockfolio, which was a crypto tracking app. Which sold to FTX, which was has been in the news lately for not great reasons. But when we sold to them, was it 2.5 years ago? It was definitely still kind of an up and coming exchange, and so I think we've had that experience both in the consumer tech creator economy space as well as the blockchain space. And that's what kind of naturally led us to the NFT space, which we got super excited about after NBA Top Shot launched.
Love it. Super interesting. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about Unblocked? Maybe just like, what is it? Who's involved? All that?
Yeah. So we've built a platform, I think, that was very inspired by NBA Top Shot. We've always felt that blockchain notoriously historically has been hard to get into for the mainstream consumer, and so our vision for Unblocked was to build bespoke kind of branded experiences to help onboard the masses onto Web3. So our platforms don't require a MetaMask wallet or crypto, like ETH to buy things. We've made it fully custodial, prioritized user experience and user onboarding, and so everything can be done with email login and paying with credit card. Again, the goal is just to get the mainstream audience realizing that Web3 does not have to be scary. And I think our background, where most of the team comes from, Flipagram, TikTok, Blockfolio, these are very, consumer-friendly apps, just really led kind of credence to our thesis of, I think users want ease of use to get into the space, and they don't need it to be decentralized or all these security things with non-custodial. And so we were able to get a lot of brands and investors when we first started to buy into that thesis and that notion, especially with our pedigree. And so, our investors include Marcy Venture Partners, which is Jay-Z's fund. Shawn Mendes personally invested. Electra Field Management, which is Post Malone's management company. Oak Tree Capital, Tiger Global. So just a lot of strategics in the entertainment and consumer tech space.
Love it. Yeah. So there's definitely a couple places I want to take this conversation, but maybe first, one interesting thing is that you were kind of one of the early voices calling for the rebranding of NFTs as kind of quote unquote digital collectibles, right? So I'm curious, what kinds of conversations were you having early on that led you to think about that rebrand? And what's the experience been like seeing others like Reddit and Instagram lately kind of follow along that naming convention?
Yeah. I think it ties back to it ties back to kind of our thesis where we just want to make this as simple and as friendly for the mass market to adopt, right? I think the word NFTs. There's different people have different perspectives on the word NFTs, and there's a negative connotation to a lot of people. Very speculative. They see all
Sure.
the hacks in the news and all that stuff. And I think this just goes in part to our thesis that, we want to make these accessible to everyone, whether that's on the technology front or frankly, just the marketing front, just
Yep.
breaking it down so it's as simple as possible. People don't have to learn what non-fungible means or,
Right.
non-fungible tokens or the tech behind it, right? They just need to know the benefits of it, and the ease of use on which to get one of these. And so, originally our company is actually called the Non-Fungible Token Company. That's our, corporation name. And as we were talking to a lot of our investors and a lot of our potential partners early on, one of the biggest feedbacks was like they just don't want to see the word non-fungible token or NFT
Interesting. Yeah.
on the platform and things like that. It's just scary, right? And
Sure.
um, and so, for example, one of our earliest partners who ended up investing in us is Billboard, Billboard Music, and Julian Holguin, who now actually became the CEO of Doodles. He was president of Billboard at that time when we first started talking a couple of years ago about this, and he was at the forefront. He was one of the people at the forefront of like, hey, let's break it down for our end consumer, right? Because Billboard touches all music fans and all that stuff, and they got feedback from managers, artists, consumers, that just avoiding the word NFTs altogether would be probably in the best interest today, as people are kind of ramping up the learning curve for what NFTs are.
Super interesting. Yeah. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about what the common alternative experience of whether it's, clients or artists or labels you work with in terms of like, say they want to release an NFT or an NFT collection, what's their current path in trying to make that happen? And how is Unblocked thought about creating a differentiated experience for them?
Yeah, so I think most of last year and even the beginning of this year, a lot of it was built on speculation. A lot of this market was built on speculation. It was built on just like, hey, let's just launch something, right? And
Yep.
kind of have like a half-baked roadmap or half-baked utility tied to it. But really, it was just all about launching, hopefully have some cool art, and these buyers would buy them up and speculate, right? And um, as someone who's like been in the market for a long time, this speculation market, it's always going to come and go, right? 2017, perfect example with ICOs and all these fungible tokens. I think our team foresaw that trend happening again. And so we never wanted to get in the speculation market. but that's what I think predominantly the market was last year, right? So it was, you do drops on OpenSea or, Sound.xyz, all these other kind of ETH-based music platforms.
Mm-hmm.
But very few of them were thinking about product around the NFTs, which is kind of where our head went because we were like, once this whole speculation dies, I mean, you got to be able to use these NFTs somehow, right? And I think, you can appeal to someone's intrinsic or extrinsic value, right? And everyone was thinking more extrinsically, but I think the way we thought about it is how can these NFTs provide intrinsic value? And I think the most, the best use case is in gaming. So we've always thought about our NFTs, how they can act as tickets within a game or a boost within a game. And so one of our next big initiatives is Unblocked Arcade,
Oh,
where
cool.
you can use these NFTs in the context of fun, repeatable games. And I don't think a lot of people were thinking about it like that last year. And so now we've noticed kind of a shift in that, right? Like Yuga just raised funding, Doodles just raised funding. A lot of these guys raise funding so that they can build a product around their NFTs now, right? Yuga's building other sides so that it's a game, so their Bored Apes can be used in a game environment now. And I think a lot of these brands are now starting to think in that direction. I know, I think Warner Music just launched something with Legend.io um, to have some sort of game mechanic around their NFTs.
Super interesting. Yeah. Okay, so you alluded to this, but it is no secret to us and everyone kind of in the space. We're in this bear market, right? And that includes NFTs, and so the hype is pretty quiet, and the builders are kind of just building. So I'm curious, what's your experience been like navigating this chilly season, and what moves have you had to do differently than maybe last year when things were a little more frothy and and bullish?
Yeah, I think so. We've been I guess, we're all affected by it in terms of volume and sales and perception and all that to a degree. But we've actually mostly been shielded by it in the sense that, our NFTs we've always pushed for like utility with our NFTs, whether they're used as tickets or coupons or a fan club membership pass. We've never viewed our NFTs as speculative assets. So we didn't lead with launching our P2P marketplace, which is slated to come out either Q1 or Q2 of next year. Which is kind of where the speculative market comes from, is the
Mm-hmm.
P2P marketplace. We've always focused on the utility of NFTs. And so, for example, like working with Billboard at all their events, we launch NFTs as kind of proof of attendance badges for people to go. And then Billboard can start identifying who's coming to all their events, who their, top event goers are, and they can reward these super fans and kind of build a community around these fans, right? Whereas historically, I think brands, one, haven't really had access to that data, or two, if they have access to it, there's only a few people who know how to query that data or, aggregate that and clean up that data. But now NFTs provide like a visual representation of that data, right? Which for most people is way easy to process and see. So, yeah, I think, we've always kind of played in a different ball game. And that's why we've gotten so much brand buy-in. Because, we view our NFTs as, utility, whether, tickets, coupons, membership passes, digital receipts. And those are not speculative by nature. And so, our prices have not had to drop because of that.
Yeah, super interesting. So I'm curious, are there any common attributes among the types of clients or brands you've chosen to take on thus far? Where I suppose I'm just kind of wondering about the adoption of some of these bigger names and how they're thinking about moving into NFTs,
Yeah.
digital collectibles. Like, what are the earliest movers aware of that maybe others aren't quite sold on or aware of yet?
Yeah, so a lot of the brands we're working with, one they actually I think all the brands we're working with right now, they've invested in us. And I think, our vision to the brands was that, um, look, this speculation hype is going to die, and we're non-exclusive, right? So they could have done drops on ETH on OpenSea last year, to make money, but you know, we've always said that I think this speculatory period will peter off at some point. And at the end of the day, these NFTs, what they do is they're the best tool, in my opinion, because of the ability to visualize data and information with these things. They're the best tool to build digital communities, right? And online presence and an engaged fan club, essentially, right? Like how our team viewed NBA Top Shot was it was the fan engagement center, the community center for the NBA, right? It was where fans got to meet other fans, players got to meet fans, and it just provided a lot of media value because now there was like proof of purchasing and proof of fandom, if you will. Um, and I think that's what NFTs provide for a lot of these big brands, right? A lot of these big brands making, a couple $1,000s off NFTs is not super meaningful, top line or bottom line, right? But for them, if they can build a super engaged digital community that has a lot of, fan engagement and this and that will, grow their enterprise value far greater, than just selling a couple NFTs for a couple $1,000s, and these are the brands that we've been fortunate enough to work with, where they buy into the vision that the long-term play is to build a digital community, and I think COVID sped up the need for that, right? And my argument is always like, Bored Apes, Yuga Labs, they built a couple $1 billion brand, and you could argue their product was their community, you
Yep.
know. And so I think a lot of these brands that we were fortunate enough to work with, like, buy into that notion and are very forward thinking on that front. Um, just like Time Magazine is probably one of the most successful, Web 2 legacy brands transitioning into Web 3. And, Keith has done a great job over there of creating like a loyalty kind of program with Time Magazine NFTs. And I think they came out with a stat, that the users who had one of these NFTs were way more retained than someone who just like had a regular subscription to Time Magazine.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I think it's all about digital community building and the brands that acknowledge that is a big thing to focus on for the future. Those are the brands that we've been able to get.
Yeah. Love it. Okay, so I noticed a recent blog post on Unblocked's blog titled Coachella NFT Passes in Limbo After FTX Collapse. And so I'm wondering, from your vantage point, how else has the FTX fiasco affected the environment you're operating in, maybe in terms of trust or interest? Is it noticeable, or are the folks you're working with kind of tuned in enough to Web3 to sort of recognize that, that's kind of a particular thing that happened that's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to affect their interest or movement towards NFTs or digital collectibles? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the FTX thing, I think, has definitely affected, every part of Web 3 and blockchain and the entire space. I think mostly it stems from, funding or cash available and consumer perception, right? So, um, like a lot of crypto investors were invested in FTX and or, invested in a company that was invested by FTX because, FTX had the venture studio that they invested in a ton of companies. And, that has a lot of long-term ramifications. I think even consumer funds, a lot of consumer funds put into FTX and they all lost a lot of money. Um, and so, consumer funds are becoming a little more skittish, with regards to this stuff. I think due diligence is going to go way up on anything touching, Web3 and blockchain. And frankly, a lot of these kind of Web3 startups a lot of Web3 startups like put their treasury in FTX, to earn the 4, 5, 6% yield. Just like a bunch of them had put in Luna for Anchor's 18% yield, right? And so um, it the next couple months, just from what I'm hearing behind the scenes, there is going to be a lot of fallout just because a lot of these startups runway just got cut like a ton, right? Because they had
Yeah.
treasury and all these platforms and people who FTX invested in, they're obviously not going to get a follow-up round from FTX. Consumer funds aren't really investing right now. Crypto funds all got lost a ton of money because they were in all these deals. And so yeah, it definitely has long-term ramifications in the fundraising and startup viability. Uh, that playground. So yeah, that's definitely affected a lot of things. And then just consumer perception. They're like, man, if it can happen to FTX,
Yeah.
it can happen to anyone. Because what was it, like 2-3 months ago? FTX was buying up BlockFi, and
Right.
like SBF was the white knight, right? And
Yep.
um, yeah, so if obviously they think it could happen to anyone. And then, yesterday or 2 days ago, Binance just paused withdrawals for a bit, right? And there was a run on Binance. And, so it's definitely trickling down.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe more positive note. I'd love your bigger picture thoughts on the future of NFTs or digital collectibles. For example, a few days ago on Twitter, I noticed your team announced some new utility you're building and adding to the original collections you've got. So where else
Yep.
do you see NFTs going, especially with respect to utility?
Yeah. Yeah. I think NFTs will be the best digital community building tool. And I think we've kind of just scratched the surface of it. Because, putting an NFT in a product, it takes time to build that product, right? Whereas last year, everyone was just making artwork and then just, hiring a smart contract engineer and just putting their stuff, minting it on OpenSea, which takes way less time. I think last year was more about production in terms of the artwork and all that stuff rather than product building. And the behind the scenes guys like us, we were focused on product, right? We didn't launch anything yet because we were focused on building product. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that. And I know like the biggest thing in NFTs right now, as far as what investors and people in the industry are very bullish on, is NFTs for gaming, and NFTs as fan club memberships, and NFTs as coupons, right? Because there's a tracking that can be applied to NFTs as coupons that you can't with physical coupons. And so I do think there's going to be a lot more utility that comes out in the next couple months to a year. Everyone who's quietly building in the background in the last year plus.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've kind of mentioned some of the folks you guys have raised from, really pretty remarkable set of investors. So I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about what the story was like in those early days, in those pitches, and then kind of how you approached the fundraise, kind of more maybe philosophically, you could say, or how did you approach it in general?
Yeah, yeah. So we raised, I think, a lot of it was just based on our pedigree. So we raised our pre-seed round. It was me, the two co-founders, um, and we have that kind of consumer and blockchain background. We just had a big network of people in LA, just from what we've done in the past. And so the first person we actually approached was Roham and the Dapper team, Dapper Labs, because we just really love the way they approach NBA Top Shot and just generally the way they approached blockchain, which was make it stupid simple for the end consumer, um, get them in, and then slowly educate them. Whereas I think most companies just kind of took the approach of, oh, let's, everyone's going to adopt a MetaMask wallet, and we should be as, crypto centric ethos as possible, Um, and so we just really loved Dapper's approach and Roham's vision. So we linked up with him, and then he was basically like, "Well, we'll support whatever you guys want to do." And that's when me and the two co-founders actually decided to start this thing. I think more formally, and then just reached out to our network, and we closed a little over 5 million on 15. I think it wrapped up in 2-3 weeks. I think. I remember we were getting our first checks before we had a bank account, and that's yeah, it was just like pedigree and network. And then yeah, couple months later, I think the week before Thanksgiving was the big the seed round, which was 10.5 on 90. Um, that was the one led by Tiger Global, um, and all our investors are strategic, whether they have IP or have access to IP, because we were very oversubscribed on both rounds. So we took strategic. We prioritized strategic capital.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and they've been awesome investors. Like everyone's been amazing. Like whatever we need, whatever intro we need, whatever IP in their portfolio that we want to start working with. We're just still trying to flush out a V1 version of the product. We're still adding features and all that to the V1 version, and once we kind of get everything down, yeah, we have a pipeline of company, pipeline of brands who we're going to work with just because of our investors.
yeah,
So it's been super exciting, and we're just very fortunate to have such amazing investors.
yeah. That's awesome. Okay, Harrison, two last questions. So, first question: what kind of generalizable advice would you give to founders building in the Web3 space? Like, say you could give yourself advice when you first started this journey as a founder. What would you say to you?
Yeah, I'd say definitely think long and hard before you jump into it. Um, so, I mean, startups in general just tough, right?
For sure.
And then when you're in a space that's so volatile, right, on things you can't control, right? It's not like we can control market conditions and this and that, and and when crypto and goes into a bear market, it's it can be long winters, um, and also just like because it's such a new space, you got to be patient with educating users and all that stuff, right? Like, um, because like public perception is everything, and most of the public is still learning about this space. So, be patient in educating them. But I just say, like, I think the biggest thing is, you have to come in and, be humbled, right? You're going to learn things every day. Our strategy has changed probably like 20 times since we started,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And that's just a function of how volatile startups are, period. But then you got to add the how volatile the market is with crypto. So just, be humble in that you go in knowing you don't have all the answers, um, but that you'll kind of figure it out along the way, and just keep an open mind, because this tech changes like week to week,
Yeah.
and perception changes week to week, regulation changes week to week, and
Right.
you just have to kind of have the stomach for it.
Yeah. That's great advice. Okay.
Yeah.
So last question. What are you guys working on right now, and what's the best way for people to follow along on the Unblocked journey?
Yeah. So we're launching. We launched Billboard's Billboard's own kind of membership pass. We are in the works with working with a lot more kind of brands to get a lot more brands onboarded. We're also spinning up a creator program. When we did it at TikTok, it was obviously super successful. So we're now at the stage where we have the process down, the manpower, where we just want to onboard as many creators as possible, like independent artists and independent musicians and all this stuff. Because the feedback we've gotten is a lot of these artists and creators, they just have no idea how to get in the space. They don't know how to mint. They got to watch a bunch of tutorials to get in, and it's just not feasible for the average person. And so we've built a system where we just let the artists focus on what they do best. And we take care of all the minting, the scarcity modeling, the strategy behind it. And so that's set to launch later next week, right before the holidays. And then our P2P marketplace should be out in Q1 or Q2 of next year. So that we'll hopefully get kind of the volume and the transactions up. And then we're also launching the Unblocked Arcade early next year, which is when you'll be able to use the NFTs you have with us in kind of like what I liken to is like basically like adult version of Chuck E. Cheese. You can use it to like as tickets to like earn stuff or participate in games or things like that. Really excited about that.
Very cool.
Yeah, and you can just keep up with the updates in our Twitter or our Discord.
Awesome. Harrison, really great speaking with you. Thank you so much for the thoughts and the time. Really wish you guys all the best continuing to build Unblocked, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.